Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Who's Your Rabbi? My name is Jaime, and I want to say shalom and hava to everybody. Today, we're going to be doing a topical lesson, uh, and it's a topic that connects well with what we've been doing with our, in particular, with our RUaCh series, um, because as you may or may not know, even though the book is literally called the Acts of the Apostles, it really should be called Acts of the Holy Spirit. Because what we're going to talk about today is actually the word uh, RUaCh, which, if you when you translate it, it translates to either spirit, breath, or wind. And this is actually the case for also for the Greek word. And so in the Hebrew, you write the word ruach with the resh, vav, and chet, right? So three letters, but it's pronounced with the ah as the vowel. So it would be the equivalent of writing something like RUaCh, or actually more accurately be RUaKh. But the more common translation or Latinization is the ch ending for the chet. The Hebrew, not the Hebrew, but the Greek word is pneuma, and like I said, the similarities in meaning are pretty much on the same level. So that's why when they translated the Septuagint from the Hebrew into the Greek, um, the um, the translators, decided to use this word as the word that describes these aspects. Um, so. Uh, The term Holy Spirit or Ruach Hakodesh appears three times in the Tanakh or the Hebrew Bible, um, and one of the examples that we actually have is Psalm 51, and it refers to your Holy Spirit, so the Ruach Hakodecha, and then Isaiah refers twice to his Holy Spirit, which is Ruach Kodsho. Um, and these are some of the few times that the term actually shows up. So I went and did a conspiracy comparison of some of the modern translations, and primarily sticking to messianic translations because, well, they have the tendency to stick to the Jewish aspect because it technically is a Jewish translation, um, meant for, you know, uh, bringing the message to Jewish believers and or potential converts. And so, and like I said, as you know, the version that I've been using for the most part for our studies is the Tree of Life version, or the TLV. And so I looked it up, and then one of the great things about these times is that you have all these resources and tools. So when you're actually studying Bible, the Bible itself, and or need different versions of it, comparisons. If you're on a computer, a desktop, laptop, PC, my recommendation is to use Bible Gateway. It's much more user friendly than some of the other stuff out there, and it has these cool stats. So, like if you do a word search, for example, in this case we did Ruach, and I pulled just out of messianic translations that are in Bible Gateway. um, it gives you like the books and how many times it appears. So according to the TLV, the word it appears 286 times, 80 times in the Tanakh or the Old Testament, and then it appears. Um, Let me look at my notes here. Sorry. Uh, 206 times in the New Testament, and that's kind of what led to this. Since we're doing the whole study of the Book of Acts, and like I said, the Book of Acts is probably the heaviest actually when it comes to the actual New Testament. Um, According to the TLV, the total amount of times that this word is used is 57 times. So um, the next uh, book that even comes close to it is actually Romans, which is still a far cry with 19 times. Uh, the Gospels themselves don't use the word so much. Shows Matthew with 11 times, Mark 6 times, Luke 16 times, which is kind of interesting. And John only 8 times. I would have thought that John probably would have had more of this, but um, it's not as mentioned. Um, and then you go on to some of the Pauline epistles. A few of them are in double digits. Um, Book of Hebrews 5 times, and some of the general epistles. First Peter has the most with 6 references. Um, when it comes to the TLV translation, so that's what we're kind of gonna analyze, right? But then I looked up you know, the one that kind of started it all with uh, Dr. Stern's Complete Jewish Bible, um, which is basically the reference, for messianic translations, and then spawned off some of these other versions. Um, Funny thing is that the New Testament, according to his translation, which is actually in some instances more Jewish, using more terminology and stuff like that, that's transliterated from the Hebrew than the actual TLV, only has it 90 times in the New Testament. Um, and then I looked up another translation, which was um, the Orthodox Jewish Bible, which is also another Messianic translation, and it actually has more. But that translation in itself has is like kind of like the name says, Orthodox, so it's a little bit more extreme when it comes to how Jewish it wants to be, and it also uses it's basically Ashkenazi, and so it has a Yiddish influence also in it. It's a good translation, but I think the one that kind of gives you the core study key points and wording and phrases. For the most part, the TLV points out those things. It doesn't translate some of the unnecessary words per se. Um, into or transliterate into the Hebrew, or in some cases the Aramaic, or the Greek. Um, but it stays faithful to the actual message. So um, then I found another version. I hadn't heard of this one, but it only seems to have the Old Testament. It, it uses the Christian order of the books, but it's called the Names of God translation. Um, and this one has a moderate number of times, but just some interesting stuff to look at. Um, I might make this available as a PDF. So, um, if you guys want it, just make it known, and we'll find a way to get it out there. But like I was saying, the word ruach, as a designation for wind, necessarily something found in motion with power or set other things in motion, uh, is used a few times. The divine designation, or also apparently has intensifying functions in a few passages, such as when it says the RUaCh Elohim in Genesis 1:2, and the RUaCh Yahweh in Isaiah 59:19, according to the Theological Lexicon of Old Testament, in reference to the word Ruach, right? So we have the stats here, and the term appears 38 times, 27 equaling spirit, 6 times equaling wind, and 5 times breath. And this is in the Torah only, okay? So the first 5 books, 5 books of Moses, or the Pentateuch, uh, this is the number of times that it appears. When you do accurate translations or transliterate that word per se, and then the meaning behind it in context, like I said. So, and then in Genesis 6, when it makes reference to the 120 years, uh, that the Spirit will be in them. This is the word that's used in there. Um, and it says, kind of the meaning behind it is kind of to contend or dwell in or within you. Um, so that's one of those instances where the word ruach comes into play. Um, and so it's talking about humanity, and God seeing what they've done, what a mess they've made of this. So he puts a limitation um, on how long of a lifespan they will be in. So he makes it, I'm referencing that his spirit will not be in them or dwell with them for no longer than this amount of time. Uh, so in total, it's approximately 378 in the Tanakh. Um, that's not counting about 11 times in the Aramaic, particularly in the book of Daniel. And then this is what is spoken or used of in Isaiah 61. And this is something that Jesus actually quotes in Luke, um, in what seems to be at the beginning of his ministry. Um, there is some dispute about that, but if you listen to my teaching on Lent, uh, there's an explanation for that there, and so you can listen to that and get a little bit more insight as to that and how that went about. But you know, in the New Testament, the context of the Ruach, or the Ruach Hakodesh, is basically that it is the active force behind all the actions of the early followers of Jesus. Um, and some of the interesting things is that the common result for this, whenever it seems that the Spirit is uh, acting upon these people, is that they are provoked to speak or say something, bring forth a message, in some essence, prophesy, you could say, right? Now, I'm not talking about being prophets or anything like that. That's a whole other discussion. But it's just basically uttering a message from God forth to whoever is meant to be the the recipient of the message, right? And so that's the common aspect of when that term is used, when you kind of analyze the context of it behind, that's what tends to happen. And then in theology, we have pneumatology, which is the study of the Holy Spirit. This comes into play when you're talking about different dogmas, uh, being dogmatic or doctrinal about something. In particular, the dogma of the Trinity and or Trinitarianism, right? Um, and part of the reason that I went into this is I had listened to a message from Dr. Michael Brown uh, around the time that I was doing the study, and so that kind of threw some insight. I'll um, have to look up the information and I'll make it available. If not on the context or the notes of or the comments, then in the next lesson I'll add that information so that you can take a look at it. And then there's a couple other people I was listening to. One of them is I'm drawing a blank right now, so let me look it up. Uh, but it's a Christian pastor um, who's online. He's very popular. Actually, I like a lot of his stuff. Um, but he's definitely coming from a more Christian uh, background, theologically speaking. He is very knowledgeable, so I do, like I said, do recommend you listen to some of his stuff or his stuff, and just kind of make comparisons, and then come up with uh, your own your own decision, basically, on the matter. I'm trying to look it up right now, so just bear with me. Let me see if I look up Trinity. I might find it quicker. Okay, Mike Winger. It's Mike Winger. And actually, I'm looking at the actual video. So it's called The Trinity. Can we defend it biblically? Um, and he kind of goes through the uh, different variations and everything. But like I said, this is a primarily Gentile Christian um, viewpoint. Um, it's not to say that these things cannot be found in or cannot be explained in a Jewish context, but um, there can be some differences, and so that's where some of the different perspectives come when it comes to Judeo-Christian interpretation. And so um, I suggest you take a look at this, and then we'll at some point we'll tackle the whole Trinitarian uh, doctrine, and see where you know or how some of these things came about. Okay, so with that being said, basically, uh, you know, my point of view or my opinions. And like I said, I like to make a clear distinction between both of them. Um, so I gave you the stats, I gave you the findings. I told you, I gave you some resources where to look. And obviously, there's a lot more stuff you can do. Um, Another good tool to use is Logos Bible Study software. It's a free software. You can download it to your PC, and or they have an app. But most of the stuff, the resources you have to pay for, they're fairly inexpensive. So if you know buy it here and there, it won't become too heavy a burden. There's also ebooks that you can buy. Kindle, which is Amazon service, usually has very it has a high amount of books, and that very reasonable and or even affordable prices. There's also Barnes and Noble's Nook app, and they're a little bit more expensive on some ends. You just kind of have to make comparisons, see where you get the best deals. If that's not an issue, then I have a tendency to like the actual way the app works better um, with the Barnes and Nobles version of it. But there's also Google Play books. Um, they have some cool features because you can actually upload other ebooks if you have the actual file. So, or you can upload PDF books, buy from them too, and they have fairly decent prices. So, there's all kinds of options you have out there. Um, when it comes to books and resources, I suggest you go with digital versions. This is my opinion. But nowadays we live in a day and time where you're all over the place. You're not in one place at one time, and you may need to access this information. And walking around carrying a bunch of books is not the most effective way to do it. But if everything is found on your tablet and or your phone, then it makes it a lot more, accessible at any time. Plus, you don't need a lot of these actual books per se in the for the physical version. Now, when it comes to Bibles, that's a whole different story. I suggest that you have multiple versions. You may have your favorite to do your daily devotionals or your daily reading um, in a more user friendly or easy to read format. That's all fine and dandy. But um, I do suggest that you invest in um, buying different versions so that you can make comparisons, studies, and all these other things that go along with it. And then eventually, some of the other resources, commentaries, or Talmud. Um, some of the pseudo epigraphas, the apocrypha, those kind of things that are directly related to Bible, uh, and the Bible and or Bible studies and the times that we're talking about. So, uh, that's just a suggestion. Um, when it comes to the Trinity per se, like I said multiple times, I don't go by the dogmatic approach that Christianity tends to take, and Although I would say I'm a Trinitarian, uh, I'm not a Trinitarian in the conventional and or traditional sense. And like I said, when we get into the whole aspect of the Trinity and actually break it down, then it'll make more sense why I'm saying that. Um, but um, in short, you can say basically the the teaching is, that the Godhead is one, but represented by three persons: Father, Son, Holy Spirit. These are three individual persons, and then that's where you get all kinds of issues that going in all kinds of directions, and this is part of what uh, the rabbis take issue to, because then it starts to become idolatry, basically, and go into all kinds of different sense. So, uh, can you, like I said, prove that these um, things exist within Judaism? Yes, you can. Um, but as far as the actual concept that constitutes the Trinity, um, that is a Christian theological concept that came uh, at a later time and was, adopted by most of Christianity. There are some uh, what you call dualist. So basically, it's just uh, uh, God the Father and Jesus, uh, and the Holy Spirit is basically, subservient, and or almost non-existent. There's all kinds of variations and doctrines that got made out of this, and then there's also the Unitarians. Um, for the most part, like I said, Christianity is Trinitarian in viewpoint when it comes to how they see God, um, and so these other um, variations would basically be considered heretical or heresy. So just kind of putting that out there. um, I would like also to affirm that the apostolic faith, and I'm talking about the faith of the first century, from approximately 30 Common Era or Anno Domini to the year 100, uh, and I'm clearly making a distinction between the Nazarene Messianic Jewish community, the direct followers of Jesus in the early stages, which was a Jewish movement, and a couple of those groups that spawned off of this that are under this umbrella, you could say, and Gentile Christianity, which, like I said, its earliest date you can give it is 325, um, from a legal aspect, and when the clear uh, cut split between Judaism and this new group uh, came about. And then obviously, uh, from that point on to the present time, um, you know, they are somehow connected to this. to this group and have a sense of uh, Trinitarianism for it in its majority. Like I said, there are some exceptions. Um, so we're talking about the Catholics, um, and for all those that don't know and think Catholicism is truly one, um, they need to reanalyze their structure. But the actual uh, Roman Catholic Church, and that's the church. Catholicism in itself is just basically a universal approach to uh, the Christian faith. Um, that's the difference between Catholics and Orthodox. With Orthodox is basically a straight path. Um, but when it comes to the actual organizations or movements that they use these banners, the Catholic Church is actually divided into 24 rites. It's essentially 24 different types of Catholicism, um, primarily based on uh, linguistical or cultural liturgical traditions that developed with time. Um, but like I said, we're talking about 1054 AD, between 1054 and 1204, because there's no clear, even though they're historically they teach about the Great Schism starting or taking place in 1054. It actually was a about 150-year process before everything went down, and then there was a clear cut division in the movement. And so at that point, that's when you have Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And then you have the Anglican Church, which split, and this is a direct split from the Roman Catholic Church in 1534, um, and then the Reform and or Protestant movement, starting with Martin Luther, um, starting in 1517. This, under this umbrella, you have the Methodist, Anabaptist, Baptist, and then a couple other little groups here and there. I don't consider the evangelical or charismatic movement a part of the Protestant movement, because pragmatically they are different, although they do have a tendency to lean towards a um, Reformed theology. Um, I, I would consider them a separate branch um, from the traditional uh, Reform or Protestant movements, um, which are in comparison and in practice closer to that of the Roman Catholic Church, which is where they actually split from. And then you have the Restoration movement, um, primarily led by the Church of Christ or the Churches of Christ. Then there's the International Church of Christ, which is a split from the Church of Christ. There's also the International Christian Church, and then a couple other offshoots of that. There's also another one called the Christian Church, um, and these are what are referred to sometimes as the Campbell movement, um, and they're more have a tendency to be more biblically inclined, and their theology is less developed. Uh, and with the focus on evangelism and spreading the word, and the the different distinctions. But um, in a way you can, and you might find this, that you can actually put Mormonism under the restoration banner, because essentially that's what it was at the beginning. It was trying to restore something, versus and this is the distinction. The Reform or Protestant movement, um, and there is a slight difference there too, but we don't want to get too technical and too theological right now, with the different dogmas. But is basically they're trying to, like the word says, reform Christianity. So, you know, they noticed that it became something else, so they want to take it back to its origins, um, by but reforming it. So doing restructuring and changing here things here and there, and so on and so forth. Whereas the restoration movement wants to basically restore what was the first century church in the book of Acts. So their whole viewpoint comes out of how the book of Acts, or their interpretation of the book of Acts, um, and how the church developed from there. Uh, so those are some of the differences that we have. So like I said, I don't subscribe to church dogmas. You know, and when it comes to the whole Trinitarian aspect, the whole traditional three person view of Father, Son, Holy Spirit, has some issues. Um, you know, but one of the other dogmas, which was actually considered heresy, would be modalism. I don't apply to that. And like I said, we'll discuss this further. And in my research and findings throughout time, I have a tendency to lean towards the Jewish aspect for multiple reasons, but the primary reason was that that's where I actually started getting answers from the sources that actually made sense, versus reading some of the Christian, traditions, and then there's all these things, and like I said, at some point Christianity became dogmatic, um, and that's the difference between, or one of the primary differences between Christianity and Judaism. That Judaism in itself is not dogmatic. It's somewhat of an open debate or discussion, and you'll find that in the Talmud, and you'll find that in the New Testament. So the Bible doesn't contradict this. It people eventually down the line that contradict this. Yet, when Christianity got established, and first thing they did was basically start formatting dogmas. But these dogmas are made by man, and there's faults in every single one of them. So, and they don't most of the time end up not resembling what maybe the original intention was, and so it turns into something else, and then that's when you have all these issues down the line. Um, so with that being said, then the question should be, um, you know, is this biblical? Are we, actually able to support this whole concept of the Trinity in particular, um, with within the Bible itself, right? And so, um, like I had mentioned before, there's a lot of resources. Uh, I would recommend you going out there and listening to some of the stuff, taking some notes, and then we'll go back and revisit this, um, especially the Trinitarian aspect. We'll break it down, um, but I don't want to go through the whole explanation of the Christian perspective when there's a somebody who did a pretty decent job and um, has that information readily available for you. So, like I said, check out that video by Mike Winger, and then take your notes, and we'll go back and revisit some of this stuff. Um, Other than that, we're just gonna continue with our teachings moving forward. Um, like I said, part of the reason I did this was because it fits in perfectly with the Act series, which is the longer series that we're doing. Um, and I just put the second part of Acts 8 and made it available, so you can take a listen to that. And then Acts 9 is coming up, and like I said previously, I am planning to hopefully be able to put this study together and put it turn it into a book. And so some of this stuff is going to be in there, um, with the core being the actual study on the book of Acts, chapter by chapter. And I'm working on the breakdown, but part one basically will either end with chapters, or volume one, I should say, will end with either chapter 9 or 10. I'm still kind of considering where that's at. But and then we'll have the following volume for a few chapters, uh, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So those things are still kind of in the works. There's different ways it could be split up. So um, definitely the next volume will probably be either 10 or 11 through 14, um, and then retaking the next section from 16, and forward to the end of the book, and or maybe making another division there. So that's it. With that being said, I just want to say, you know, hopefully this helped you clear up some things, and also spawned a little bit of a interest in going and doing your research on your own. Um, but until next time, I want to say shalom and hava to everybody. And Psalm 122 says, Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So I'll talk to you next time. Shalom.